nestled in the hills of southern Spain, lies a ribbon of winding tarmac, 5.5 kilometers of fast straights and sweeping bends, a coliseum of motorsport designed to test man and machine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ascari racetrack, a fitting battleground for a fierce rivalry, a sibling rivalry. You see, for decades, the Golf GTI has been the king of the GTI family, but now there is threat from the Polo GTI and the Up GTI. Do they have what it takes to be a worthy adversary, or can they even beat it and steal the crown? Which GTI is the best GTI? I'm here today to find out.
Which GTI is the best GTI? That's a good question, but I think before we can answer that, we have to understand what makes a GTI a GTI. And to do this, let's take a trip back in time, back to 1976, when this car, the Mark I Golf GTI, was launched. The Mark I Golf GTI was not really the first hot hatch, but it's been widely acclaimed to be one of the best and the genesis of what we know today as the hot hatch. And boy, does it deliver. The formula was simple. Take a practical, affordable family hatchback, add a powerful engine and a capable chassis, and voila, you have yourself a cool little sports car. The steering is really communicative, very sharp and nimble, a light gearbox with a nice throw, good pedal feel, mechanical fuel injection, although the brake is a bit dodgy since it's so old. And I really understand now what a GTI is. I've been driving this car for a while and I've been able to understand the soul. And now let's go drive the Up GTI, the Polo GTI and the Golf GTI and see if the new cars are still able to capture what this car created. Before we start driving these three GTIs on the racetrack, let's take a quick walk around to see what the differences are in the design. First of all, let's start with the Up, the smallest member of the GTI family. I think the Up already, the base variant, is a very fun, cute, very young looking car compared to the others. Overall, everybody says Volkswagen design is always very conservative, very mature, very simple and subtle, but I think the Up is actually a little bit different compared to the others. And so, building on top of what is already a fun design, I think the Up GTI is perhaps the most interesting to look at. We have the iconic GTI badge with the red stripe, although in the Up it does not go through the headlamps. In this case, because we do not have the LED lights either. There's a shiny, glossy front bumper and a more aggressive lower section of the bumper as well. Now let's take a look at the Polo GTI. I think the new Polo has a more mature look. It has grown in size thanks to the MQB A0 platform. It's wider than the previous version, it's longer than the previous version. It's got a longer wheelbase as well, which means there's a lot more space. It's an overall bigger car. That's what everybody will tell you. So I think the appearance of the GTI is also a little bit more understated. I think the Polo and the Golf GTI, as compared to the Up GTI, are have an understated cool look. They're cool without trying too hard, and that's the best kind of cool, isn't it? We do have the red striping along the headlight cluster on the Polo, some more creases on the bonnet, which is the standard anyway. The GTI badge is bigger as compared to the one over there, and it's in very nice, shiny, bright red color. The bumper is fairly simple. Even down here, it's not overly aggressive. But of course, thanks to the lowered suspension, both of the GTIs are 15 millimeters lower. All of them are lowered. So it has a more hunkered down, aggressive stance. And in this black color with this red striping, has a very stealthy fighter kind of a look. What do you think? And of course, there's no need to introduce this. This is the Golf GTI. This is the facelift of the 7th generation. And this is the performance pack. Of course, the line for the red lining through the inside of the headlamps, and here it's in two separate segments as compared to the Polo, which is just one, but it's kind of a squiggly line, whereas here you have two crescents and two cuts which join together and then go across the front bumper. a similar badge to the Polo for the GTI logo over here in bright shiny red. The bumper is very large. In the GTI you have a very smiley face, kind of a grill, whereas in the Golf R it's kind of inverted, a more frowny face. What do you prefer? And on the side we have these air intakes, which are cosmetic but also help channel a little bit of air around the front of the car to make it a little bit more streamlined and aerodynamic. So, which one do you like the best? The Up GTI is the smallest in the GTI family, standing at a mere 3.6 meters long. Of course, you do have the 5-door option. We have the 3-door here. I think in the front bumper kind of wraps around towards the side, and you have these large matte black housing for the fog lamps, which curve to the side. It's pretty cool, I think. It looks nice. We have 17-inch wheels as standard. Very good looking. The all-important GTI badge over here, which all the 3 cars have. There is a blacked out rear view mirror cover, as well as a contrasting roof. It's not a panoramic sunroof, but it's just a contrasting roof. It's an option as well. And being the 3-door, the front door is considerably longer, and it makes the car look a lot more sporty. And the window line rises up towards the back, and I think it's a very cool looking design. The back is fairly vertical, but as you already know, perhaps, because of the tall stance and this kind of squat length, there's a lot more space on the inside. So while it's a compact car in terms of dimensions, there's a lot of space on the inside. That brings us to the Polo GTI. This stands at 4.05 meters long on the new MQB A0 platform. The housing for the fog lamps comes towards the side a little bit, and there's the lower skirt for the bumper, which carries over from this side and all along the bottom of the door to kind of make the car seem a lot more lower. This car has the 18-inch wheels. It comes as standard with 17. These are optional. In this black color, I think the Polo is the most subtle in terms of its design. It's not really shouting out to you, and if you are not really paying attention, you might even miss that it's not really a GTI. This has the panoramic sunroof, which is also optional. And towards the back, a more sloping roof line, and the spoiler adds a little bit more character to it, but I think amongst the 3, it's the most plain looking. And finally, we come to the Golf GTI. I think this is the most iconic GTI, and it's also the most good-looking GTI. It's considerably larger, of course. It stands at 4.27 meters long. The side intakes from the front bumper wrap around to the side, and it looks pretty cool as well. And this car comes with the 18-inch rims. You can go optionally to 19 inches for the Golf R rims, and as standard it comes with 17-inch rims. Of course, the GTI badge, which is all important. And as we go down the side, again, looks really cool. The side skirt also pulls the weight of the car visually more lower, and a more horizontal roof line towards the large C-pillar. I think the Golf GTI looks the most GTI, if that is ever such a thing. And of course, with the performance pack, like I said, you have these brake calipers in red, which really pop out, especially when you consider the fact that the Up GTI doesn't even get disc brakes in the back. It still sticks to drum brakes. So with the performance pack, with the red calipers in this Tornado Red, amongst the 3, I think the Golf GTI is the most classy. The back of the Golf GTI with the performance pack, I think, has a very aggressive but subtle look. We have a spoiler at the top, which they say does add some downforce. I'm not so sure, but it still looks cool. It's flanked by these side sections in glossy black. The tail lamps are blacked out with a smoky effect. Again, adds that little, very subtle hint that, hey, this car means business. A GTI badge over here, which in this case, because of the Tornado Red color, it's kind of gets masked, but still, I mean, somebody who knows what this car is will instantly recognize what it is. By the way, there are an umpteen number of different color choices for the Golf GTI as compared to the choices you get for the Up and the Polo. Down here we have the lower bumper, which I think up till here is very standard, but down here, this is where the GTI distinguishes itself. There's a matte black bumper diffuser which runs along the bottom with these air channels as well, and two really cool looking shiny exhaust tips. Let's take a look at the Polo. Like I was saying about the colors, the Polo comes with other options as well. You have the red, Tornado Red of course, which is the iconic GTI color, but also black, white, blue. But the Up GTI has a fewer choices. For example, you have the white, the black, and the red. I think the Polo in the back is not the most exciting to look at compared to the other two cars. I think these tail lamps are kind of, okay. They're not really screaming out to me or grabbing that much attention. The roof also has a spoiler, kind of a two-section spoiler. You can see a clear demarcation between the two pieces. Looks pretty cool. The GTI logo here, and it really pops out against this dark body color. Fairly simple body lines over here, and even the lower part of the bumper, the diffuser is not as aggressive as the Golf GTI, but of course it's always nice to see real exhaust tips. And that brings us to the baby GTI, the Up GTI. I think the Up GTI, again, like the regular Up, has a very cool design, even in the back. A very vertical design to keep the length very short. A large glass panel. Of course, this is the actual boot of the the Up GTI. As you can see, a thin red stripe running along the bottom of the glass here. The GTI logo in this case is just shiny metal effect font and color, so it's not red like the other two GTI logos. And even the bottom of the bumper is also quite subtle, but nice single exhaust tip as well. One of the best parts of having a hot hatch is you don't have to compromise on practicality to have a fun, sporty car. And the boot of the Golf GTI is a very cavernous 380 liters, very square stance, not much of a loading lip thanks to this movable floor, so you can really open it up to have more space or put it up so that you have a very flat loading bay. On the back you can of course remove the parcel shelf out of the way like so, just a couple hops, and you can see that there's a 12-volt power socket over there, and you can fold the seats down with these tabs over here in a 60-40 fashion. There we go. Let's move on to the Polo GTI. Thanks to the MQB A0 platform that I was just telling you guys about, the Polo now has a very large boot of 355 liters, so not much different than the Golf GTI. And as you can see, this is also a very rectangular square loading area with also quite a minimal lip. You can also remove these, the parcel shelf quite easily, I was gonna say, but I think I have to pull it. There we go. So yeah, 355 liters, and you can also move the floor down in this as well. And similar to the Golf, the seats fold in a 60-40 fashion. And that brings us to the Up GTI. This is the smallest boot, obviously, predictably, at 251 liters. And like I showed you, it's a full glass door. And first of all, you also get the 5-door version of the Up. We have the 3-door here. So yeah, this is good enough for a week's worth of grocery shopping. And if you remove the floor, you can get a little bit more volume, but this is not really meant for carrying large items. Let's take a quick overview of the interior of the Up GTI. The body color from the outside continues through on the inside. Of course, it's the same metal panel of the door, but they kind of kind of brightens up the interior, makes you feel more connected with the car. And even on the outside, you know, with the stripe on the bottom and with this really nice textured pearlescent finish, checkered, you know, it's kind of like a grape juice purple color, if it makes sense. Kind of makes the car seem a lot more lively. And of course, you cannot have a GTI with anything but tartan seats now, can you? And you do get nice tartan seats with integrated headrests. The seat is adjustable for height. Of course, you can slide it up and down as well as recline the back. The steering column, however, can only be adjusted for height and not for reach. And the truth is, this is a very tall car. I have a lot of headroom, but that kind of raises the center of gravity. And I can already tell you, on the road and on the track, that's not really the best thing. The dashboard is also quite high. But anyway, the steering wheel is got a nice grip. It's got the GTI badge. It's a flat bottom, so it's a cool GTI steering wheel. I have a very small tachometer in the side, a large speedometer, a screen which gives me some driving data like fuel consumption as well as speed, and the trip meter, a fuel gauge and a temperature gauge. And again, very minimal dashboard. I think you just have your climate control, in this case the auto climate control, which comes as standard with the UP GTI. A very simple, not touch screen, a very simple media system for your radio and settings and connectivity and for the phone. But all of the navigation, for example, is handled through your smartphone. This holder, this binnacle for your smartphone comes with the car. It's built in, it's not an aftermarket piece. So I guess it's kind of cool, but at this price point, I wish that UP GTI, maybe they could have had one of the regular touchscreens, like from the Polo, for example. But there's plenty of storage spaces over here. You have a 12-volt power socket, the 6-speed manual GTI shifter, manual handbrake, a glove box. Yeah, so it's a pretty nice place to be. You could also get the 5-door, but if you don't, you can use the lever over here to tumble and slide the seat forward and climb into the back. And then you have to use the lever again to put the seat back into place. I'm 5'8", or about 1.7 meters. The seat is set to my driving position. And well, yeah, I wasn't expecting this car to be very spacious. There's plenty of headroom, of course, because of the tall body. The seat is fairly comfortable, but if I were you, I would just get the 5-door. I know the 2-door, the 3-door might look a little bit cooler in you know, some perspective, but it would make the car a lot more practical, especially in the back, because it's not that comfortable back here. The inside of the Polo GTI, I think, feels a lot more special, thanks in part to this large inlay over here. You have so many different choices of colors. So the whole door panel is covered in plastic, albeit it's still the very hard plastic that we see in the regular Polo. But again, the same GTI steering wheel with paddle shifters in this case because of the DSG automatic gearbox. A lot of controls on the steering wheel for your audio, for your assistant systems. Seat can be adjusted completely for height and the other settings. So can the steering wheel column. So finding a comfortable and sporty driving position is very easy. This also has a lower dashboard, so you do feel lower in the car and you feel a lot more sporty. I think this is a more sporty car in terms of feeling than the UP GTI. Of course, there's a sunroof, so makes it a lot more airy. Tartan seats, because how else can you have a GTI? And very importantly, this has also the digital dashboard, the digital cockpit. Of course, options. And with this, you can see our other reviews for more detailed information, but there's so many different things you can do with this, so many different views. You can have just the map, and of course, you have all of the other systems and a lap timer, driving data, assistance systems for adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, a plethora of all of these things. And over here, we have the infotainment system, different options as well. Touch capacitive hotkey buttons as well as knobs on either side, which I think is the best way to execute this. Of course, I think you guys are very familiar with this. You have your media, radio, telephone, vehicle settings, navigation, App Connect with Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, Mirror Link, and Yes, of course, some images that you can store on this. And of course, more important for the GTI are the driving modes. So you have Eco, Normal, Sport, and Individual, but I can really show you what you can do with this. Of course, the steering wheel weight can be changed, the throttle response and the gearbox can also be adapted to be more sporty or to be more economical. Air conditioning and the adaptive cruise control also can be economical when needed. And this Polo GTI has the optional Sport Select package, which is a suspension adaptive damper package, which gives you normal or sport as the two options for the damping rate. And this car also comes with the sound actor, which is a small puck-like disc resonator, an acoustic resonator, which is in the engine bay right over there. And this picks up the vibrations when activated acoustically from the engine, and it vibrates and resonates and pipes that sound into the cabin. And it also transfers the vibrations into the windshield, and that's why you can really hear a more deep tone from your engine. Even though it's a small 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine, it gives you a more sporty experience. And honestly, I think this is quite all right. A lot of people might not like this and call it a fake sound, but why not? What if I can't afford a V8 or a V12? I still want to enjoy a good, sharp, sporty sound. And the sound actor lets me turn on that sound whenever I want. It's not a microphone and speaker digital sound. It's an actual acoustic vibration that I feel from the actual engine when it's under load. And I think this is a much better, fake system compared to cosmetic air intakes or cosmetic exhaust tips. I don't think they're doing much to add to the car, but this sound actor, I think, is pretty cool. The Polo GTI comes only as a 5-door option, and I personally prefer it this way. The door opens really wide, although the materials everywhere are really hard, as with the standard Polo. But getting inside is really easy. It's a lot more spacious here, obviously, than the up. And because the car is lower, it's wider, the roofline is lower, and the suspension has been lowered and stiffened. It has a more lower center of gravity. The wider track and the longer wheelbase also liberates a lot more space on the inside, which translates to more legroom, more headroom, as well as, of course, more stable, composed, planted cornering ability, which we will see out on the racetrack. Tartan seats, and even though there is a large central transmission tunnel, if you want to share the footwells with your passengers, sitting in the middle seat is also not that bad. The Golf GTI, as I said earlier, feels a little bit more grown up than the Polo. It doesn't have a very colorful inlay like we saw earlier in the Polo, nor does it have that cool, kooky design elements from the up. So it's a little bit more, mature that way. But that doesn't mean it's not cool, because of course you have the GTI steering wheel, which already makes you feel like a boy racer. In this case, we have the 6-speed manual, which has this golf ball finish. So it feels really nice to shift and hold the shifter. The seats already, I can tell you, even though I haven't driven on the track yet, is that it holds you in place a lot better, thanks to more stiffer and bigger side bolstering as compared to the other two cars. And of course, tartan, duh. The seat, of course, can also be adjusted for height and reclining and sliding. The steering column, of course, can also be adjusted for reach and rake. This car also has the optional digital instrument cluster, the virtual cockpit. And of course, there are so many different settings that you can have, and you can zoom in and out of the map. You can choose different kinds of menus, different screens. I mean, there's just so many different things you can do with this. It gives you really important information. Also comes with a lot of assistance systems like adaptive cruise control, front assist, lane departure warning, and you can control all of that here. The steering wheel also has a lot of buttons on the left and the right. And as we go over to this side, this has a different touchscreen than we saw in the Polo. Doesn't have any of the knobs, but this also has gesture recognition, or it should, but doesn't always work when you want it to. But I think this is a good system. You also have App Connect for Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, Mirror Link. So it's very useful to mirror your phone. You have the other things that we already know. Climate control, dual zone. You can also get an inductive charger, USB port, auxiliary, and of course driving modes And like the Polo, this has DCC, but not just the Sport Select, but a full 3-stage DCC, which is the dynamic chassis control, which sets up the suspension, for example. Steering wheel feeling and the weight can be increased as you want. But of course, all 3 cars have a fixed rack, but of course, a faster rack than the standard versions of the car. You can also change the throttle response. There's also a limited slip differential, so you can also change that to sport, and that helps reduce torque steer. Dynamic corner lighting, and of course the engine sound with the sound actor is also here, and you can really feel a difference between the 2 options. Some cubby holes over here, an armrest, and a 12-volt power socket. You can get the Up GTI in a 3-door in markets. You have to check your local dealer, but of course with the 5-door you have the added practicality. You also get central AC vents in the rear, so that's also an added plus. Plenty more legroom. I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters. Whenever I do this segment, always keep in mind that the driving seat is set to my driving position. A lot of space, a lot of width. The materials on the door are pretty hard, but it feels a lot more nicer than the Polo. There's some fabric inlays over here. It's obviously a lot more wider and more comfortable. There's a central armrest with a tab as well, with cup holders and a ski hatch. There is a large transmission tunnel, of course, but thanks to a very flat and low center seat and large footwells, a third passenger is also fairly comfortable. The Up GTI comes with the 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, 1-liter capacity, which makes 115 horsepower and 200 Newton meters of torque. It's coupled with the 6-speed manual transmission, and it's transversely mounted and front-wheel drive, as with all GTIs. This engine propels the Up GTI from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 8.8 seconds. And it does so while sounding really cool. I'll show you guys later on. And interestingly, the Up GTI comes as standard with a particle filter. So in the city, you want to have a fun, cool little sporty car, but at the same time, it gives you good mileage and is pretty clean to the environment. So a very sustainable solution. The Polo GTI comes with one of the EA888 4-cylinder 2-liter turbocharged petrol engine blocks, and in this case it makes 200 horsepower and 320 Newton meters of torque. This engine, you have the option of either getting it with a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed wet DSG. The engine propels the Polo from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 6.7 seconds, and of course it's front-wheel drive only. The Golf GTI also has one of the EA888's 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. The standard Golf GTI makes 230 horsepower, but with the performance pack that we have here, it makes 245 horsepower, 317 Newton meters of torque, and takes 6.2 seconds from 0 to 100. The standard Golf GTI gets the option of the 6-speed manual or the 6-speed DSG, whereas this performance pack also gives you the option of the 7-speed DSG. Of course, still front-wheel drive. I know that was a lot of information to keep in mind for the rest of the review, so let's kind of sum up what we've learned about the exterior and the interior. The Up GTI starts at around 17,000 euros, the Polo GTI starts at around 24,000 euros, the regular Golf GTI is about 30,500, and the performance pack that we have today is 33,000 euros. So that gives us a pretty good idea about the price performance value. Now, I think the Up, like I said, already was a cool looking car. I think the GTI doesn't do too much to change that outlook, but at the same time, because of the really high dashboard and the steering wheel, yes, is very GTI, and the tartan seats are very GTI, but I don't think that it's worth 17,000 euros. And if you want to get into the GTI club, I don't think you'd be wanting to join that club with the Up GTI. But the Polo, on the other hand, has a lot of fun elements, like that dash of color in the middle of the dashboard with that inlay. The tartan seats and the Golf GTI, and the GTI steering wheel, of course, makes it look and feel like a sporty car. but thanks to the fact that it's lower, the seating position is lower, the dashboard is also lower, and of course you have so many more features with the touchscreen infotainment system as compared to the Up, which you have to use your smartphone. I think the Polo is a good medium. The Golf GTI, of course, is the classic GTI. It's a lot more mature, it's a lot more bigger. The inside is a lot more monotone with just black dashboards. And of course the features are more, but I think at 33,000 euros, it's not really giving me anything extra that the Polo is not giving. Again, purely in terms of exterior and interior. So let's keep that in mind, and now let's get to what you guys came here for. Let's take these cars and head out onto the racetrack. All right, so let's start off small. Let's learn to walk before we run. And in that philosophy, we're gonna start with the Up GTI out here on the Ascari racetrack. So let's do one quick pace lap to just get the gist of the track. We're on one section of the track, so not the entire track. All right. This track is a really good track. It's kind of like a culmination of some of the best parts, some of the best corners of various famous racetracks from around the world, put together in a nice sequence, and it's a really fun track. All right, so let's start analyzing the Up GTI. Well, let's start with the things that I like. Okay, first of all, I think the important thing, like I said earlier, is for a car that to excite you, it has to sound good, it has to feel good, and it has to look good. The Up GTI, I think, definitely looks good on the outside and on the inside. It's fun, it's cool, it's a bit quirky, so that's covered. In terms of sound as well, this 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine really sounds nice on the inside as well as on the outside. Of course, it also is thanks to the sound actor, which amplifies the sound and resonates it, and you can also feel the vibrations on the windshield. So that's good. Steering feel is also pretty nice. It's fairly light, but I expected it to be light. This is not the Polo GTI or the Golf GTI, so definitely it's good for what it is. It's large, it's got a flat bottom, it's got a nice grip. Feedback is pretty good. Then let's talk about the bad things. And unfortunately, there's quite a few of them. First of all, it's just too tall. The center of gravity is, I think, a bit too high. And you can see that I'm really leaning over to the side. It tends to roll quite a bit too much to be a real sporty car. Of course, none of the GTIs are meant to be track cars. That's not at all what they're trying to be. The Golf R maybe is more towards that direction of being a track-focused car, but certainly the Up or the Polo, they are not. But I drove the Up yesterday off camera on some beautiful winding roads, and it wasn't that bad, but it's definitely more top-heavy and more roly-poly. The brake feel actually is really good. If you had any inhibitions about the fact that there is a drum brake in the rear, you can lay them to rest, because the brake feel is really good. It's got a really nice, strong, clean bite. Very progressive. But yeah, it's a bit too roly-poly. The seats don't have good enough side bolstering. I am really tossing around. The truth is, when you're driving on a track or when you're driving quickly, you shouldn't make yourself rigid and try to hold yourself in the seat. No, because then your footwork, your handwork is all getting a bit compromised. You should be completely relaxed, and the seat should hold you in place. And this doesn't do that, not at all. Speaking of the seat, this is as low as it will go, and it's really too high to really feel like you're in a sporty car. My knees are upright. I feel like I'm sitting in a desk chair. The dashboard is also fairly high, so in order to, enjoy the drive, you still have to be sitting too low. You're still sitting too high to really enjoy the drive. And the gearbox, well, this track really allows me to keep it in third gear the whole time, but if I want to shift up or down, it doesn't have such a very clean feel. It's still a bit soft, it's still a bit spongy around the edges. I think the Mazda 2, for example, has a really nice gear shift. You would have heard a lot of other journalists say rifle bolt action. You know, of course, I've never handled a rifle and I don't plan to, but I know exactly what it means. I can imagine it. And then when I drove the Mazda 2 and any Mazda, for example, the MX-5 as well, just the mechanical feeling of the metal pieces well oiled, slotting into place with each other. That's just, I don't really get that from this gearbox. Throttle response is pretty good. Clutch action is also really good. There is definitely torque steer. Let me try to demonstrate that. Let's see, we're going to a fairly short straight, unfortunately, but I can demonstrate to you already that there is quite a bit of torque steer. Let's see, I will try to do that on this curve over here. I'll put it in third gear. I will drop it down to about let's say 40 kilometers per hour, and then, or let's go to second gear, and then you will see here. Ready? No, it doesn't want to do it now, but trust me, there is definitely torque steer, and in fact, I felt that more prominently on the open road. Now this track is a bit too curvy, and we're really in a section where there aren't too many straights. But if you put your foot down in third gear, once the turbocharger really kicks in the torque, it just torque steers to the right, which is not really a deal breaker for me, but something to keep in mind. So overall, the Up GTI in isolation is pretty good. There are things that give away the fact that it's not really a hot hatch. The power to weight ratio is decent. There's enough poke. The engine sounds really nice. I think that's the highlight, but the gearbox could be a little bit better. The seating position could be a little bit better. Let's see what the other big brothers of the Up GTI have to offer. All right, now we're in the next step up from the Up GTI, the Polo GTI. Now let's, I tried to demonstrate if there was to demonstrate the torque steer in the Up GTI. That didn't really work, so let's try to launch the Polo and see if we get some torque steer. Very little bit, you can see it went a little bit to the right, but I think that's very much okay. Wow, there's already a world of difference between the Up GTI and the Polo GTI. I mean, come on, seriously, this is a true hot hatch. 200 horsepower, it really feels so much more energetic, so much more urgent, so much more eager. It really has a more explosive character than the Up GTI. And already I can tell you the seats are so much better. There's a lot more side bolstering. So like I said, I'm being held in place a lot better, and I can take these corners at much higher speeds, and that sound actor really helps improve the sound of the engine. Brake feel is really good. I'm driving with the DSG. Unfortunately, I don't have the 6-speed manual with me to test here. This also has an electronic locking differential, not a limited slip differential like the Golf GTI with the performance pack gets, but still incredible lateral grip. The car really does rotate so nicely. This is a real hot hatch. I think the Up GTI, unfortunately, I mean, there's so much of difference. I'm really feeling the grip. I'm feeling what the wheels are doing. The steering wheel is so much more communicative. Throttle response is instant. I'm letting the DSG do all the work because I think it's always better to analyze the gearbox when you leave it in automatic and not use the paddle shifters. Body roll is so well controlled. It's got the Sport suspension package, which gives you the adaptive dampers, the Sport Select package rather. So it's really composed, brakes really well. It's a lot of fun. I think this car is definitely a genuine GTI and a genuine hot hatch. And because it's got the wider track and the longer wheelbase, it's really composed. You know, I don't feel the car ever feeling out of place. There's a little bit of lift-off oversteer, so this car really is very playful. Wow, a lot of grip around these chicanes. The car really does rotate very nicely. I'm not really a big fan of brake-based torque vectoring differentials or these kind of E-differentials because they really deplete the brakes a lot quickly, and you're in fact slowing down the car a little bit to achieve that torque vectoring locking effect. But I must say, why not? I mean, again, this is not a track car. None of the GTIs are track cars. But because of that diff, I mean, look at that it turns in so well. Take a wide line here. It's an off-camber bend. Come over here, hard on the brakes. Dive into this left-hand turn. Late apex there. Power out. This car teaches you how to be a better and better driver on the track. So you can track this car very easily. And of course, this has even more practicality than the Up GTI because you have a lot more space. And the seating position, which I complained about in the Up, is also much better in the Polo. The seat is much lower. Obviously, I have the seat in the lowest position. I feel lower. My feet are stretched out further in front, so I feel more sporty. The dashboard is low. The dashboard is also quite shallow. There's a lot more space on the inside. And of course, the steering wheel column can also be adjusted for reach, which the Up GTI cannot be. So finding an even better and more comfortable driving position is possible. Yeah. I can do this all day long. Woohoo! Okay, I think it's time to step out of the Polo, although this car I think has really won me over already. And let's see what the Golf GTI with the performance pack can do, and if that extra weight and size that the Golf GTI has can really be compensated for the not so much different 45 horsepower extra that it has over this car. Because let's face it, the performance to weight ratio is what really matters. And the Polo, that way, being light and that wider track and longer wheelbase makes a good chassis, the sport suspension, adaptive dampers, and 200 horsepower. It's a really great combination. So, should the Golf GTI be worried? Let's find out. All right, good things come to those who wait, and now we are in the Golf GTI Performance Pack. As always, or not always, since the last time we did it, let's launch the car and see if we have any torque steer. Nope. That's also thanks to this car having an actual limited slip differential, and I can feel that immediately. Speak of the devil, and there he is. I mean, this limited slip differential just drags the car into the corner. It's a really interesting sensation. And obviously, I mean, this car costs over 10,000 euros more than the Polo, so of course it's going to have better hardware. But this car automatically feels a lot heavier and a lot more cumbersome than the Polo does. Don't get me wrong, it's quick, it's got tremendous grip, it's got good power, it sounds great, again thanks to that sound actor, but somehow it feels a little bit more cumbersome in the way that it feels a bit heavier. Body control is good. You know, this also has the dynamic chassis control, which is the next step over the Sport Select suspension that the Polo had. These seats are also, this is the microfiber seats, not the tartan seats that we saw. The side bolstering is pretty good, but I don't know, maybe I was expecting a bit too much, and the Polo GTI was a pleasant surprise. But to be very objective, I mean, the Golf GTI Performance Pack has a lot of the hardware to really help it shine, you know, with the upgraded brakes, because you have really good brake feel. I can show you right now, really good brake feel. The throttle response is really good. This 245 EA 888 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo petrol engine also revs really high, and the limited slip differential, of course, really helps it corner, but it's not that playful like the Polo was. The Polo was, I think, a little bit more light on its feet. The car was rotating around me because it was smaller, it was lighter, it felt more nimble, felt a little bit more agile. I can already feel quite a bit of understeer right here. You could see that I was, you know, if you pull the wheel a bit too hard, it understeers. Whereas the Polo, honestly, it didn't really do that much at all. But I think, you know, if you want to have a true GTI, the Golf GTI Performance Pack is the one to get. The standard GTI, I think, is too close in terms of in terms of performance to the Polo GTI. And, you know, it's kind of encroaching on the Golf territory. We'll have to wait till June of next year when the all-new generation Golf is released, and of course the GTI that comes with the Generation 8 Golf. But at this moment in time, you know, having driven these three cars back to back within minutes of each other, and first impressions are usually very intuitive. I mean, understeer is a little bit more prominent in the Golf than the Polo. But yeah, I can also demonstrate to you the difference the sound actor does with the driving modes. So I can go to individual here. The steering wheel already becomes really light, but motor sound, there we go. So now this is in sport. You can hear it, but if I go to eco, it sounds a lot quieter already. I don't know if you can pick it up on the microphone, but yeah, it's pretty cool. But of course, you want to drive a Golf in sport mode all the time. The paddle shifters on the DSG, this has a 7-speed, mind you, not the 6-speed like the Polo has, but it shifts really quickly. It's, of course, what we expect. The paddle shifters also give you good control to downshift when you're going around corners like this. It blips the throttle on its own. You can take these corners at part throttle, accelerate on the way out. So I think the Golf GTI really does what you want it to do, but I think the Polo GTI does more than you ask for it, because it's got that advantage of being a lighter car with a lot of horsepower. And you can always add more horsepower to a big heavy car, but there's always more enjoyment to be had in driving a small light car fast than driving a big heavy car and just holding on for dear life and feeling that weight rock around. So that way, I must say, if I had the choice between these three cars to drive home today, I might actually pick. Let's summarize today's episode of the three GTIs, the Up GTI, the Polo GTI, and the Golf GTI. First of all, we enjoyed making this film. Jonas and I loved it. If you guys enjoyed the film as well, please do hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and leave us your comments. Tell us which car that you liked in the end. So now, the question that we had in the beginning, which GTI is the best GTI? Is it the Up? Well, I think the Up is a pretty good package. It starts at 17,000 euros. The Polo, by the way, is 24,000 euros. And the Golf GTI, and you only want the Golf GTI with the performance, trust me, that costs about 33,000 euros. So even though if this is the cheapest, it's still a bit expensive for what it does, because I think it really, it's let down by its seating position, which is I think a bit too high with the high dashboard. The gear lever also, it feels a bit spongy. And even though the engine sounds good, and for this size and this weight, 115 horsepower is enough, I don't think it's a real GTI. And the biggest problem I have with this is Forget the siblings here. Why not the cousin, the Seat Ibiza FR? You can get that with a 150 horsepower engine. It also has a lower chassis. It's actually got the MQB A0 chassis that the Polo has. It's got a stiffer suspension, sporty steering wheel, and because it's got the wider track and longer wheelbase of the MQB A0, it's a lot more composed on the racetrack or even on winding roads. So unfortunately, in today's episode, the Up GTI comes in third place. That brings me down to the Polo GTI. This car was really surprising. I knew this was going to be interesting and it did not let me down. The MQB A0 platform, great platform. It's been lowered by 15 millimeters, has that adaptive dampers, so it's really capable and very controlled in terms of body dynamics on the racetrack and on winding roads. And let's not forget 200 horsepower. That makes this car a pocket rocket. Then finally, the Golf GTI Performance Pack. Well, we're gonna have a new Golf GTI next year, so this car really has a lot to prove, and I think it's good. Again, all three cars are good in isolation, but driving them back to back to back, the Golf GTI seemed a little bit heavy to me. And you want the performance pack, you want the 245 horsepower, you want the limited slip differential, you want the big brakes, and that's a little bit expensive. And is it really worth it? Is the Polo better than this? If I had a choice today to drive home between one of these two cars, what would I pick?